Thank you, Lauren, for the kind introduction. And thanks to everyone in the room for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to me speak. My ultimate goal is to give you some practical take-homes that you can apply with any student, whether they're mid-handicapper, whether they're an amateur, or whether they're an elite player. So I'm going to really try and cover the whole spectrum today. I also want to extend special thanks to Karen Harrison. She asked me to do this today, and since Karen's arrival at Bishopsgate, she's been amazing. Her and Dr. Neil have been very gracious in their time, helping me and educating me. Okay, so a quick overview. I'm going to discuss a little bit more about my journey and how I became to stand here today. I'll talk about what my coaching goals are, and then I really want to delve into where does golf psychology start, because this has evolved over time for me. Like Lauren said, I've been doing this about 8 years, and the practice that I have now is quite different to when I first started. I'm then going to discuss how I implement this at the Bishopsgate Golf Academy. And I want this to be as interactive as possible, so don't hold back. If you have any questions, please just put your hand up, and two-way dialogue, I think, will be a lot more effective than me just talking at you guys for 35 to 40 minutes. So, my journey, I'm obsessed with human performance, and I've been studying it and looking at the literature now for just over a decade. And I found my way into golf when I was playing at my local club, Cuppage Hall in Leeds, and I was playing with a young 12-year-old boy who the most prominent thing in his game was excessive club banging. So he was actually going to be suspended from the golf club, and I gave up a little bit of my time to help him manage his emotions on the golf course. And that, I guess, act of kindness led to me going back to university, studying sport and exercise psychology, launching Leap Golf UK, where I worked with a whole spectrum of players on their mental game. And now, currently, I'm extremely blessed to be the Director of Mental Performance at Bishopsgate Golf Academy and the International Junior Golf Academy. This gives me the opportunity to work with around about 140 juniors and really help make an impact on their golf game, but also my main aim on their life. I really want the psychological characteristics of excellence that they can learn in this sport to transfer into their values of life. Also at Bishopsgate, I get the opportunity to work with some of the most passionate, educated and forward-thinking coaches that I've ever met. So it's a real privilege for me to do that job, and hopefully that comes across in the presentation today. So, when I coach, what is my goal? My goal is really to help players get their thoughts and their feelings to match their intention. So in golf, a player's intention is to hit a good shot. So I want to help players develop strategies that get their thoughts and feelings in line with this. If we take a look at the screen, that's the 17th at TPC Sawgrass. And a lot of players will have the habit of, they'll walk onto this tee and they'll basically say, okay, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, don't chunk it, don't embarrass yourself. That strategy doesn't take them closer to their intention. If I ask everyone in the room now, okay, don't think about your bum on the chair. What's the first thing you thought about? Don't do this. Don't think about your feet on the floor. Where did your focus go? It went to your feet on the floor. So, don't hit it in the water is really telling yourself, hit it in the water. So, what I want to help players develop, I want to help players develop what's called a process focus. So a player that develops this might walk onto this tee, and initially when they see the shot, they're focused on diaphragmatic breathing to help them relax. They're then engaged with their yardage book. They then may have a goal of a purposeful practice swing. that's really going to help them generate feelings of the shot they want to hit. They then maybe pick a specific target out in the distance and hold that image in their mind as they hit the shot. Those kind of thoughts generate feelings that get the player closer to their intention. And often golf psychology is made extremely complex. And that's really what I've boiled it down to. That's always in the back of my mind when I'm coaching. And that's not just coaching golf, that's coaching life as well. Some of the students I work with, they might want to be brain surgeons. So every day, I want to help them generate thoughts and feelings that create an attitude that get them closer to that intention. So the man in the picture, probably the master at this, he's quoted a lot as saying, whether it's a 2-foot putt on the first or a 15-foot putt to force a playoff in the US Open, I'm always in the process. I'm aware that some shots may be more important than others, but nothing changes. I'm always in the process. So this guy mastered getting his thoughts and feelings to match his intention. And that was always my first goal. A player came to see me, okay, let's work on this. As my practice progressed, and as I read and studied more, I thought, you know what? This is actually a little bit limited. And I tried to create an analogy to help you guys understand this. So, we would, as you look at the screen, the guy on the left, we would not ask him to lift the weights that the guy on the right is lifting. But people were coming to me, and I was asking them to think like Tiger Woods. And I started to realize they're not conditioned to do so. So although I had some good results with players, and I helped players progress from mini tours to the bigger levels, there were a lot of players that were really struggling to implement these strategies that I was coaching. So I decided, okay, I want to change this. This word was prominent in my studies, and then it became more prominent in my coaching. Metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's own thought processes. And the more I read, the more I studied, the more I experienced coaching, I started to realize the students I'm working with, their metacognition is low. They have low awareness of how they think. I would recommend this book. This book was actually recommended to me by Dr. Neil, so it comes from a very good source. And this quote stuck out to me a lot. The most fruitful time to transform pessimistic children into optimistic ones, before puberty, but late enough in their childhood so they are metacognitive. Now this is a very, very clever guy, and he's saying how important metacognition is in making change. And I wasn't implementing that in my coaching really when I first started. So I wanted to improve this. So I created a sheet. Really simple. I asked students to track their thoughts. And I put all the stuff that I'm quoting today, there's copies on the table if you want to look at it. There's not many, but if you want more, pass me your email addresses at the end and I'll give you guys anything from today's presentation. So, when players set foot on the golf course, I ask them, okay, I want you to put a green dot if you have a positive or a process-orientated thought. I want you to put a red dot if you have a negative or an outcome thought. Students went away, engaged in this, and it started to help. And then at the Bishopsgate Golf Academy, I asked them to start doing it, not just on the golf course, but for a whole frame of time, a whole period of the day. And I remember once, a young student came to me, good player, regularly shot on the par. He came to me, and his sheet looked like that at the start of the day. So I'm pretty worried about this kid. I'm like, wow, are you okay? He's like, yeah, it's just normal. Just lying in bed thinking how much I don't want to go to school. I was like, oh, right. And I was just about to maybe push my beliefs on him or give my intervention And he said, but don't worry, Ian, it's fine, got it all under control. I've written 3 motivational words, and they're on my alarm clock. So when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to see those words, and it's going to change the way I think. And I was like, wow, this coaching stuff is easy. Just give him a task. And, you know, he's making the change himself. And that's what I started to see. These practical tasks and these practical challenges, and not just juniors. This was across the spectrum. They engage in this. There's something about completion of a task or a game or a level that human beings engage in. So it became a real focus for me. And I started to see the results. So this year at Bishopsgate, with the help of some coaches, Zach and David, who are in the room just here, we decided to do this on a larger scale. So Zach and David, they operate in a pod with 20 students. And we got all 20 students to do this. They did it for 7 days. They did it from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. And at 8 p.m., they had to reflect on the visual. So I asked them to look down, maybe create a ratio or try and notice any patterns, but they had to reflect. Day number 8, they were going into competition. 16 beat their scoring average. Now, scoring average is not always a good indicator of learning, and it's not always a good indicator of performance. There's so many variables that go into a scoring average. So I went to the post-tournament evaluation with David and Zach, and I sat with every student. 95% of the players reported increased enjoyment. And honestly, that's my key goal. I'm not about making champion golfers. I'm about lifelong participation in the sport. You can't create a champion before they've decided that they're going to stay in the sport forever. So I'm always focusing on participation in the sport. 95% more relaxed, 95% better focus. So I'm starting to think, okay, this is cool. Then I remember, I'm working with junior golfers. They're just going to tell me what I want to hear so that I leave them alone and they can go and play PlayStation. So I spoke with the coaches, and I've been in these practice sessions as well. The coaches reported better body language, more optimum arousal, but most importantly, effective practice environments. And the effective practice environment was created because a lot of the time, students behave like this. But now, we've given them a task, we've given them something tangible, something challenging, something that they were accountable for that was interrupting these habits. So it was starting to change the way that they were behaving. Not only was it giving them more awareness, but it was interrupting habits that they formed over time. A good book on this is, I think the guy's name is called Charles Duhigg, and it's called The Habit Loop. And he talks a lot about how we build up these negative habit loops and how we can break them. But the students that we were dealing with have negative habit loops. So not only did this actually help them with their self-awareness, it actually was interrupting the patterns that they had conditioned themselves to run. So I get really excited by this point, and I think, okay, where do we go next? Let's really help the students change their habits. So I created this. I created Thought Tracker, Thought Trainer. So after students had tracked their thoughts, I wanted them to begin to train their thoughts. So little, and this is all scientifically based. Attitude, thoughts of gratefulness and positive attitude, listing things that the student was grateful for, little mini meditations. And a meditation can literally be just taking 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 20 seconds out, focusing on your breathing, feeling your breathing, and off you go. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes listening to music guiding. These little mini meditations, I set them a challenge of doing between 3 and 5, and they had to tick it off as they do it. Positive reframes engage in a random act of kindness, journal your day. At this point, I must stress I'm not a golf psychologist and I'm not a scientist. I'm basically taking the work of these extremely clever people and I'm adapting it into my coaching models. So rather than me talk about why this helped, I want you to listen to this guy. This guy's called Sean Anker, and he's been to Harvard. I think he studied there for 12 years, and he studied what he coined the science of happiness. And really, I just adapted his work. So rather than me talk, this video lasts about 2.5 minutes. I'm going to play this, and while he's speaking, just relate it back to the sheet that's on your table.
We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow a formula for success, which is this: if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is, it's scientifically broken and backwards for 2 reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looked like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got to a good school, now you have to get a better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. You hit your sales target, we're going to change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we've pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does negative neutral stress. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than did your brain at negative neutral or stress. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative neutral or stress, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has 2 functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We found that there are ways you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of it, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about one positive experience you've had in the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain that your behavior matters. We find that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once. It allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness. We get people, when they open up their inbox, to write one positive email, praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities, and by training your brain, just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success, and in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much.
The whole TED Talk lasts about 12 minutes. He speaks extremely quickly, so he gets a lot in those 12 minutes. You may be sitting there now thinking, oh, well, Iain just stole his ideas, and you'd be correct, I did. But I always reference him, and I've reached out to him to try and explain to him what I'm doing. I've not heard back, but I always credit him. When I discuss that sheet, I always credit his work. So I would watch the TED Talk. It really is very good. But I would ask yourself this. How many players that you work with are waiting to play well, and then they'll be positive, and then they'll be process focused? Like, they've got it the wrong way around. Just like he's saying how the world has it the wrong way around. They're waiting to be successful, and then they'll be happy. Golfers are waiting to play well to be positive and process focused. They have to create those habits first before they can play well. So that's why I really like these challenges that I've created for the students. We have the thought tracker. It tracks their thoughts. It increases the self-awareness. It gets students process focused, changes the practice environment. And we have the thought trainer. The thought trainer can really help students start to begin habits. Some might even say recode their neural pathways to think in a more positive and process-orientated manner. And this is where my practice now has evolved. This is generally where I would start. And I'll say generally because everyone's different. So after doing goal setting and an in-depth case history about the student and their desires and what they've been through, generally this might be one of the first challenges that I set players. Because after doing this, now they're conditioned. Now they're ready to push on and try and develop that Tiger Woods-like focus. But prior to that, I don't think so. I think they need more help before we start with the on-course strategies. So what I want to delve into now, I want to go into the way that I help students evolve a process focus. And this is going to be as practical as I could possibly make it. So while I coach, as well as my goal of thoughts plus feelings equal intention, I always have this quote in the back of my mind by Benjamin Franklin. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So I'm always trying to involve the students in everything that I do. I really don't want to give direct instruction. I really want them to experience it for themselves and actively discover the solutions in the best way for them. So I'm going to give some examples of how I do this. So this example I'm about to play, this is a putting example. So a lot of this is based around the literature on constraints-led learning. So if we place a constraint on the person, the environment, or the task, these constraints can encourage a certain set of behaviors. And then these certain set of behaviors that emerge can lead to a certain form of learning. Some would debate that it would induce a deeper form of learning because they're experiencing it. Honestly, I don't know. Some research says yes, some says no. I don't know. But what I like about this is it's practical and the students actively discover solutions. So this is one for putting, and I'm trying to get the student to actively discover what target connection is. We've all read the books, Focus on the Target. A lot of coaches will tell a student, focus on the target, but what does that mean to the individual? So I'll play you the video. Sense the whole. No looking, just sense it. Spin. Sense the whole. Spin. No look, sense the whole, feel the whole, see the whole, in your third eye. So I create that task. So the student sets up, they engage with the target, so they know where the target is, they spin, they're not allowed to look back at the hole. That's the constraint. So what does that force them to do? Forces them to create a mental representation of where they believe the hole is. They're compelled to work harder to make a meaningful target connection. I've not told them to be target focused. The task is forcing them to do it. Awful coaching by me on that video. I spoke way too much and I actually began to instruct. I did think about filming another video to make myself look better, but I thought I would show you that, it's very hard to resist to be an instructor. Even then, even though I know all about this, I spoke way too much, and I probably started to impose some of my values or my beliefs on the way that she engaged with that task. What I should have done or said absolutely nothing and give them feedback at the end and then let the task repeat. I also like this drill because a lot of our students will get very internal. They'll think, oh, the club head should go there, or my left wrist or right wrist has to do this. Again, science and research says that's not the best way, the most effective way of mentally engaging in a pull. Those kind of thoughts and the feelings that they generate probably aren't going to take the student closer to their intention. By making this game-like or making this a challenge, you can make it even more effective. So you might go, okay, hold 3 in a row from 3 feet, then 3 in a row from 4 feet, 3 in a row from 5 feet, and the task's done. If you miss at any level, you start that level again. And again, Sean Anker spoke about dopamine. That kind of game-like training enhances the production of dopamine. When we're successful, it lights up the reward centers. It makes us want to practice more. We become addicted to the process of practicing. Okay, chipping example. I want students to be more reactive, more free, more creative when they chip. Good, now react. Good. Oh. Pretty good effort. The goal is chip the first ball along the floor. The second ball, you've got to land it on top of the first one before it reaches the end of the green. Pretty hard to do, but what does it mean? Chip the first one, you can't now stand there and get all internal. You're forced to actually almost predict the future and react to where you think the ball's going to go. And at that last second, if you think the ball's further away, you'll be more free with the club. So this is one that I really like with people who are already good at chipping. If you are not very good at chipping, probably not where we're going to start, okay? This kid's a good player. This is actually the 12-year-old I told you about. Eventually he came and he got a scholarship at Bishopsgate, so it's been a great journey for myself and Tom. But a really good game, and again, you can make it a challenge. You can estimate the proximity that you missed the ball by, and you do 10 goes. You add them up at the end. Are you inside or outside of your end goal? But real fun game. Okay, full swing example. The goal to actively discover relaxation techniques. Go. Now getting steady. Getting steady. Now explode. Come on. Me, on me. Come on. Good. Now relax. Getting steady. You do all 3. Good. Come on then, explode. On me. Go. Push it. Now relax. All the heart rate getting steady. Well done. Okay, so the goal of this one, actively discover relaxation techniques. So when the student runs, their heart rate increases, muscles are firing, so they're more tense. We're actually likely to somewhat simulate the physiology that they'll feel under pressure on the golf course. Running gets the heart rate up, gets the tension up, then you have to hit a shot. So in this moment, my hope, and the constraints-led learners in the room, or the people that like that research, would hope that he is teaching himself to hit high-quality golf shots under stress. And I believe that that's the case. No child ever really took walking lessons. Everyone seems to do okay in regard to walking. So there definitely is a lot of relevance regarding this constraints-led learning. But to a point, I'm not going all out there and saying that, okay, we just need to set tasks and we don't need to coach and they'll self-organize. I disagree with that, because the best way to breathe is diaphragmatic breathing. he wasn't diaphragmic breathing at this point. So the breathing technique would need some refinement. So at this point, the coach's role, once the student's gone through a few reps and is starting to build the habit, engaging in any type of breathing is better than none. But at some point, I would have to pull him aside and help him refine his breathing technique. So sometimes these tasks are, again, maybe to open up windows of opportunity to coach. You can put these into levels. So the one on the screen was no target. We could add a target. Then we can add random targets. We could put balls all around the range with differing lies, make it real complex. And then finally, we can take it to the golf course and it's speed golf. And then they really are doing it in the environment that they're going to be exposed to in competition. And this is absolutely key. And the reason this is key is because it helps the students create mental representations. So if you get the chance to read a book called Peak by Kay Anders Ericsson, he talks a lot about this in that book. But what the student is doing is they're gathering chunks of different information and they're putting them all together and they'll have representations. So if they're 1 under par, going down the last, leading the AJGA, and they need a par to win, or if it's the club championship, and this is a 6 handicapper and he's never been there before, all the 2 handicappers normally win, and he's in the lead, and he's got to hit 60-yard pitch over water, he has some representations in his mind that he can recall on in that moment. The heart rate's up, the tension's high. He can say to himself, come on, you've been here before in training. You've done this during speed golf. What do you do? These are the strategies that you implement. And this can happen on a conscious level. It can also happen on an unconscious level. But very, very important to understand that. So I have a wide number of those kind of challenges, probably maybe up to about 50. So if anyone has any questions after this presentation about things that players have been struggling with, maybe I can give you some examples, or if you reach out to me, I can send you guys video. The final thing when it comes to that is self-recording. Students really need to regulate their learning. So if you look at the top one, I finished off with the speed golf, so we'll give that example. There's a target in there, so there's some outcome stress. They've set themselves they note down what they actually scored, and then see, hear, and feel. So the experiences that they're having, they're sitting down and recording. And the most important part of this is the final column. Okay, what have you learned? How are you going to transition that into competitive play? From your experience today, what can be your process goal? What thought are you going to take into competition that will generate the feelings that you need to get closer to your intention? And then again, this is going to need intervention by the coach. The player here is going to need some guidance. So really, we're creating coaching moments. We're not asking the students to 100% teach themselves. We're creating coaching moments. And this is again, I think this, I put this sheet on your table, so you can look at this. And if anyone has any questions, please ask. Okay, so now on to how do we implement this across the board? How do I work with the coaches at Bishopsgate? And the CEO of IJGA just arrived, so I have to also now say an IJGA as well. And Eric's here, so Eric, don't worry, I wouldn't have left you out. So how do we implement this as a team? Because I don't believe that mental performance is this little thing that's on the side. I don't believe that physical performance is this thing that's on the side. And I don't believe that technique is this extra little part that needs practicing on its own. It's all dynamic and all intertwined. They interact with each other. So the first example I'll give you at Bishopsgate And as I said, these are some of the most passionate and committed and educated coaches that I've ever met. And they're up to speed with the learning sciences. So they understand what interleaved practice is. And interleaved practice really induces a deeper form of learning. So through variability of task, we challenge the memory to recall more. And in this challenge, we can induce, through this challenge of the memory, we can induce a deeper kind of learning. So an example, you might have a student, it's a bit like circuit training in the gym. On station 1, they're in the mirror and they're working on whatever it is they need to be working on, getting visual feedback. At station 2, they're hitting shots, but at a certain point when the move they're working on breaks down, they have to reset and go at a slower speed. Then they can build speed. When the move breaks down, they reset and go again. Station 3 could be a shot shape. And then station 4, maybe it's one of those tasks. Maybe it's one of my tasks that are in at station 4. And then at station 5, there's a performance challenge. And if you don't complete that performance challenge, you can't come back round to station 1. This is quite a complex circuit. It could be as simple as you're doing one of those games that I showed you on station 1, and then you have to hit 5 balls, focusing on whatever it is you're focusing on in your swing. And then you maybe go and do one of your stretches. It can be a lot simpler. It can just be alternating between 1 or 2 tasks. But what this does, once the player gets up and down, they come back around to station 1, they've forgotten what that move feels like. So again, mental representations. They have to think about what they were doing, and then it's harder. They're more likely to fail, but once they access it, then they're more likely to access it again and again and again. So it just induces a deeper kind of learning. Another example I would use with the coaches at Bishopsgate and at IJGA is create contextual interference. So we've created games. At the start of the presentation, I spoke about trying to reduce this kind of behaviour through getting thoughts and feelings to match the intention. We're using Thought Tracker to help students break these patterns. So as coaches now, we're pretty cool because we want to put them into positions now where we're going to try and draw this kind of behaviour out. So a real tough game that we play is called birdie par to progress. If you make par, you go on to the next hole. If you make birdie, you can skip a hole. If you make bogey, you go back. If you make double bogey, you go back 2 holes. So it leads to a lot of this. It leads to a lot of stress. Now, contextual interference doesn't just come from differing lies, wind, pins being cut in tough places on the green. Contextual interference also comes from psychological interference, the potential for the stress response to happen. So we want students being stressed in training, myself and the coaches, because then, again, it creates a coaching moment. We can watch and we can collaborate as a team. I can go in, or the coach can go in, when a student's behaving like that, and we can remind them of the strategies that they're going to need to employ when they play in the monthly medal, when they play on the European Tour, when they play in their next AJGA. So, again, another way that at the academies I work at, we merge the mental and the technical together. The coaching moments is also important that we go in at the right time. We've had students that have been extremely stressed. So at that moment, if they're emotional, stand back, let them cool down, and we use the Edify platform. So you can see here we've got some coach-led feedback. So the coach makes a video of what they're seeing while they're on the golf course, and then the student feeds back. And then we have the opposite, we have a student feeding back at the end of the night. So again, we talk a lot about this constraint-led learning and creating the environment, but if students aren't regulating, aren't reflecting, then they're not learning. So it's very important that we encourage that. A tactic that we use a lot, and this is in another book by Anders Ericsson, he calls it verbal protocol. This is in the Cambridge Handbook of Expertise and Expert Performance. He talks about how self-referencing or verbalizing your thoughts can help not only learn, but it can help coaches into the world of the unknown. So often I've seen coaches videoing routines, but that's only one dimension of a routine. That's the physical. We can see what they're doing, but what about if they are like, it looks good, oh my God, don't let it in the water. You know, it's the thoughts aren't, and then the feelings that will generate aren't in line with the intention. So when we're putting the students through these tasks at Bishopsgate and at IJGA, a lot of the time we're asking the students to verbalize what they're thinking. This lets us into the unknown. This lets us almost see their cognition. And then whatever is expressed, there's a conversation between myself and the coach or coaches. And is it suited for me to go in and help? Is it suited for the coach to go in and help? Or do we agree, let's just stand back and let the student fail a little bit more? Maybe they'll work it out themselves. But really now, this is such a powerful tool. I use this more than anything. Verbal protocols, they let you into the unknown and they really help you find an accurate diagnosis. If you think, with regard to the research on quiet eye and putting, at Bishopsgate especially, and I've done this with Zach and David, we've asked the students to verbalise where their focus is when they putt. And they get over the ball and they say nothing. They have no idea what they're meant to be focusing on. And the quiet eye literature basically tells you it's the ball, the line, or the hole. So we've put students in this situation, we've asked them to verbalise their thoughts, and when they've not done it so well, we've made the intervention, and we've had students ball, ball, line, line, hole, hole, line, ball, ball. The impact that that's had on some players' performance is insane. And now, those students are, okay, what's your process goal? Well, ball, line, hole when I pull, ball, line, hole. They don't know about quiet eye. We didn't teach them quiet eye. We didn't give them Vickers study. We put them in a situation. They weren't completing the task very well. We made an intervention. And now, that's drawn out behaviours that's in line with the research. And as a team, like I say, this helps us operate as a team, helps us collaborate, see what's going on, and come up with a more holistic solution.
How would you say that applies to full swing? Similarly, or is it quite different?
I do it the same in full swing. It depends on the student. So if I get a student and they verbalise, and they get over the ball and they're saying nothing, and I say, okay, so you weren't thinking over the ball? No, my dad told me don't think. I said, okay, well, if you don't think, you're dead. It's kind of impossible to not think. That's scientifically proven. So we want to help them develop thoughts and feelings that are in line with their intention. So you can go ball, line, target, or it could be anything. It depends on the student. Some students we've encouraged to sing songs over the ball, ones that are extremely anxious. Other students, it's really down to the individual. It could be as simple as pushing the floor. And again, that's where the coaches need my help with the psychological understanding, and I need their help with what phase of development and at what they're working on. Does that answer your question?
So it seems like a lot of juniors or any players for that matter, some have the ability to, when they're under par, to keep going.
Yep.
And some don't do as well. When you're working on constraint learning and difficulty in tasks and self-organizing failure, how do you balance that with maybe setting a scenario of ease of success?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I want the students to be thinking, because change really starts with cognition. Learning is putting stress on the cognition. So I want them to be really working out what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to do. And then I want it to be at the correct challenge point. And again, that comes with a conversation with the coaches. If this student is extremely low on confidence, hasn't been playing well, then maybe the challenge point for that is going to be lower for this student. Maybe if a student is playing exceptionally and they love the tasks, they love the failure, they really embrace it, then that game where they're on the golf course, maybe for that student, we add in every second putt has to be drawn back 4 feet. Really apply pressure on their short putting. And also, it's stats related. These guys use Birdifier, so we know what the student's stats are, we know where their weaknesses are. So if a player is really struggling with hooks, it could just be that they're on the golf course, and if they miss the fairway left, it's a 2-stroke penalty. Go and shoot this target score. But if we were going to put that in, and the student was averaging 80, we wouldn't make that target score 40. We might make it 44 or 46. We want it right on that challenge point, where if they play well, if they show resiliency and grit, we know that they can do it. If they give up and play poorly, it's irrelevant. So that answer the question. I don't think there's an exact science to it. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. You really just have to know your player. Yes and no. Again, very much down to the individual. So, if a student is very, very internal, if a student is really struggling with anxiety, if they are water, bunker, don't chunk it, in a real poor psychological and physiological state, then I might use focus band, and I would use it in a process where there's no golf ball, no golf club, no nothing, and they're just quiet in the eyes. And then I would maybe give them a club and get them walking through their routine and asking them to quieten their eyes and get the right data. And then I would ask them to hit shots, and then we would make it random practice, random targets. Then I would take it off them and ask them to generate the same feelings. Because I don't know if focus band is changing the way that the brain is wired. There's not enough data out there to categorically say that that's what it's doing. And all the mentors that I'm lucky enough to work with that are at the top of the field of neuroscience, they've told me that. But after 3 or 4 reps with the band off, maybe we put the band on, and again, we kind of use it in an interleaved fashion. What I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want to put a band on a student, and in block practice, they just hit. They think that it's going to be incredible. They get a false sense of confidence. They go onto the golf course and fail. That's what I wouldn't want to happen. So I would use it with some students, not many. I wouldn't use it regularly, but I do believe there is a place for it to help certain players. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's measuring the quiet eye again. I don't know what it's measuring. I'm probably not, even if I did know, I'm probably not clever enough to understand it fully. I would take it to an expert and ask them to look at it. If a kid wasn't engaging in the task, and maybe I put this band on his head and he thinks it's cool, because now he's got my iPhone and he's buzzing, that would be a motive for me to use it. Me actually thinking it's measuring the eyes and the brain and the relationships, I don't think so, personally. But I know that I'm not against it. I would use it, and I know people get fantastic results with it. But I worry about dependency, and I worry about the validity of what it's actually doing to a player. Is that good enough? Yeah? Okay, perfect. Ultimately, and this comes from Bob Bjork's work, who's an expert in learning, what we're trying to do at Bishopsgate and at IJGA is create retention and transfer of skills. All of the ways of training that I've shown you, hopefully, are what's known as transfer appropriate processes. It's going to help the student get their best game to turn up when it matters, and that's on the golf course. So, brief summary. My practice now starts focusing on metacognition and the mental conditioning, and then I want students to discover a process focus and get their thoughts and feelings to match their intention. I like to do this through active discovery and help the students create practical habits that they can learn. Creating the environment is so important. I think working interdependently as a team is the best thing. It's the best thing for the student, and it's the best thing for coaches. And at Bishopsgate and IJGA, the coaches that I've worked with and done that with, it's just been an incredible experience. And we're all of us are always learning, and the student benefits from that. And then doing it in this way really helps retention and transfer of skills. Thanks a lot for listening. Check out the IJGA website and the Bishopsgate website.